Um, Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to one of our presentations. And today, my presentation is going to be about computers and how a computer is built. So we are going to go over some basics about computers, how they work, what is inside a computer, and how we maintain computers at UWL across campus. So starting with general computers, just to start on a funny note, um, this is how you can actually build a computer, but you need to have a stuffed animal and put all the stuff inside, so we wouldn't recommend that. You just go for ordering computers from Dell, and most of the computers on campus here are Dell. Just about a little data flow about how computers work inside. Computers have different units which we describe as an input source, an output source, and the processing unit. And the processing unit can be defined and described and divided into three different parts, which is central processing unit, a RAM, which stands for a random access memory, and we have various other components which are related to processing the data as we enter them from the input sources. First of all, we can just describe RAM as the source which stores the data temporarily and helps in processing the data which is sent from the keyboards and other input sources which we use, like scribe prints, light scribe prints, and trackpads. Other sources are the input sources. The data is sent to the CPU for processing. After once the data is sent into the computer sends it to the RAM. From the RAM, it just processes in a loop-wise manner and goes to process further, and it is sent to the operating system, and it is directed to the RAM or the output source as a monitor here, and from the monitor, based on the other technologies which we use, it is sent to the projectors or other output sources which we have. Computer, how is inside, typically should be run by hamsters because it is cheaper on energy, but we do not do that. Basic examples of how a computer works is a CPU, register, the CPU is the central processing unit, and we have cache memories, which is the temporary memory. Every time you just process something, it always goes into the cache memory. It stays in the memory for a while. It can be simple things like when you log into a computer campus, on the campus computers here, all the memory which you enter is always gone into the cache memory. So if you log off, the memory actually just stays in for a while and then it gets erased. So every time, if you just noted that if you log onto a campus computer, first time you enter some data in there, it logs you on after a couple of minutes, which is like a lag. But next time when you log in after 5 minutes after logging off, it is comparatively faster because the information is already on there, and this is called the cache memory. So it uses the memory which is already in there for a certain amount of time and logs you back, and then it gets erased. The RAM is the random access memory, which is only a temporary type of memory. And there is a physical RAM and a virtual RAM. The virtual RAM is something which the user can divide and create inside, wherein it doesn't use any space on the computer but performs a similar task. But it is not really preferable because sometimes people have actually faced losing data and other complicated issues when they created virtual memories. So the physical RAM, which comes with the computer inbuilt, is the best way to deal with the memory issues. The storage types is nothing but the hard drive, the USB, external sources, the optical drive, and the CDs, which are the secondary storage devices which we have. And the hard drive is already built in the computer, and the memory of the hard drive can depend on the user or what comes with the computer when you order it. Typically, it can vary and range from 80 GBs to anywhere between 320 or 400. There are computers which have like up to a memory of 1 terabyte. The ROM or the BIOS is one of the most important component which we will be encountering and we would be really concerned with, because that is the one which has all the information about the computer. And when we are troubleshooting some computers, it is the most important thing we check. to see if the computer is functioning properly. It has all the information and all the functionalities of the computer, ranging from the batteries until the motherboard. So if we have an issue which we have to fix, we can always just go and try to upgrade the RAM and run a couple of tests on the RAM and see if the computer is functioning properly and where we have issues, because we can troubleshoot and direct the issue to one particular region, and that makes it easier for us to identify what is wrong with the computer. It can be a power supply issue, which we can note there, and in laptops and computers, when you replace a power supply, the battery sometimes get detected, sometimes doesn't get detected. That is based on how the BIOS is, and we have to upgrade the BIOS periodically. The removable devices are nothing but the external hard drives or the external flash drives which you use. They can be various types, and the network or internet storage means the online storage system which we have, and I would highly recommend that if you have a lot of memory, a lot of data to store, and sometimes hard drive crashes have caused a lot of data to be lost, and it is hard to recover data once it is lost. And hard drives are the ones which I was describing, as they can be solid state drives, which are really preferable because they have a good holding capacity of the data, and they are sturdy. You can actually move them around, and they store the data comparatively better than the regular hard drives. The input sources are the keyboards, mouse. Removable media can be anything from the light scribe pans or touch screens. Scanner, camera also work as through the HDMI ports. We can actually transfer or play data or media directly onto the computer and can get the output on a different source. A simple algorithm or simple image showing how a computer works and how it processes the data. The input source, as we were talking and describing, keyboards and mouse, once you give the computer a command, it goes in through the central processing unit, which is divided into two regions or two parts, which is the control unit and the arithmetic logic unit. The control unit is the important one, and which it doesn't have any function. It's more like an orchestra player. It's just, he doesn't do anything. He just directs what is going on. So the control unit also works like a person who's directing an orchestra. He just says, okay, this is what you're supposed to do, follow my directions. So the control unit receives the signal from the input devices, sends it to the arithmetic logic unit, which performs all the functions of math, which can be simple addition, subtraction, divisions, to most of the complex binary code division kind of thing. And it also performs logical functions, which can be anywhere from simple calculations of how many apples are left after you divide a couple of apples and remove some of them, to the most complex credit score detailed kind of information. And this is actually saved in the memory, and it actually continues as a loop. So from the input device, control unit, arithmetic logic unit, memory, goes back to the control unit, processes again, goes back, and then it is shown as an output, which can be a monitor. If you choose to save this data, it is saved in the secondary devices, which are the hard drives, optical drives, CDs, or external USBs. Inside a computer case, we can typically find a lot of components which we would be dealing with on a regular basis, which can be anywhere from...
Could you stop for a second? Tyler, could you maybe take the camera and manually get closer to the picture, and so it will be also available, maybe possible to...
Are you doing the right one or the left one?
or
Are you going to point to the right one or the left one? That one?
Either way, it's like just I'm just going to
Okay.
use the mouse because I cannot see the...
Okay, so you can continue. Maybe, Neeraj, could you continue closer to this so your voice will be louder?
Yeah. We would be dealing with a lot of issues which we have when we are fixing computers on campus. It can be from the regular lab or classroom computers to the faculty computers. And most common issues usually happen to be around the power supplies or the hard drive issues or the video cards and motherboards, fan, and the RAM. And the RAM is the issue which we usually try to fix by just getting the memory out and trying to place it back in place, because it can be identified as a long beeping noise and a flashing yellow light. That is how you can identify that we have a RAM issue or we have to reseat the RAM. And a CPU, we have to just go through BIOS and find out if there's an issue with the motherboard. And the fan can be just a loud, absurd noise, which is regularly as a normal fan doesn't make. And hard drive issues are Windows not booting on the computer cannot boot into Windows. If it boots, it just like starts shutting down again. So it can be a hard drive issue. Just a small breakdown of all the individual components. This is a heatsink and a fan, which is the most important component when we just like place our processor and central processing unit on. A heatsink is always necessary, and it is most important because it tries to get the heat out of the computer and maintain the normal functionality of the computer. A DVD burner or DVD is the secondary output device which we can use to burn DVDs and play DVDs. Hard drive to store data, video card to enable graphics and the normal visual display of the computer. How to maintain a computer? We can just probably try to just use this, or we prefer using 409 vacuuming and Q-tips to clean the motherboard. Just a small brief talk about what different kinds of computers which we'll be dealing with on campus on a regular basis, and what kind of campus computers we have. We have Dell Optiplex GX260, GX620, 745, 755, 780, and 960. There are different specifications for each of these models, and each one is just a upgraded version of the old one with some similarities and some differences, and some of them have better functionalities. A 620 is the most common computer which we have, which is being replaced by the Optiplex 780 currently, and most of the labs happen to have the 780s and 620s. The 620 has a Pentium D processor, which is one of the primitive processors compared to the recent ones which have come out with Intel, and it works at 3.2 gigahertz, which is definitely a good speed for a processor to work. And the hard drive capacity is about 80 GB, and they have a RAM of 1 GB DDR2. Optiplex 755 works with Core 2 V Pro, and this processor happens to be a good processor when it comes to remote service and remotely operating the computers. So we would prefer that people have the V Pro, because we can actually wake up the computers using a wireless LAN from anywhere, and you can actually be secure that the computer is in position. You can wake it up on the LAN, look for issues, and you can always solve problems at the off-site locations as well with the processor. The 755s have 160 GB hard drive and 2 GB RAM. The 780s, the most common ones which we would be having currently, are the Core 2 Duo process computer. They have 2 GB or 4 GB RAM, and they have a hard drive capacity of almost 250 gigabytes. The 960 is most of the podium computers. Most of the faculty also have the 960. They have a Windows 7 and Core 2 Duo 4 GB hard drive and 160 GB hard disk. A little bit about the different kinds of processors and what their functions are. In terms of functionality, the Core 2 Duo are the most latest ones which they have, and the Pentium D is the old one, but it doesn't really have a lot of information about how exactly or how better or what is better. If you multitask running a lot of programs like games and watching a lot of movies and everything, the processor is kind of slow when it is a Pentium D. but the Core 2 Duo has different cores, and each core has actually a capability on its own. So the more the cores, the better and the faster the processor is, but it turns out to be generating more heat. So there's bigger fans and louder noises when it comes to using different, the mostly advanced processors like i3, i5, and i7. We have a lot of Apples and Macintoshes as well on campus, and some of the podiums are actually operated by both a PC and a Mac. And just the basics about Apple Macintoshes. The first Macintosh was introduced on January 24th, 1989. So it's been almost like 30 years or so, but they still are continually developing and producing more Apple products as we speak right now. It was the first computer to feature a mouse and a graphical user interface, and Windows followed after Mac. It was actually thought to be easier, but it is more complex than actually what people think it is easier to use, because there are hardware issues there and they cannot be upgraded easily. If you have to upgrade a firmware in an Apple, you have to replace the whole system essentially. There's not a single component you can upgrade and change as such. Macintoshes are Mac, and this is the acronym which me and Tyler came up with this morning. They are the most annoying computers because we were discussing how we should upgrade a Mac, and there's no way that we can actually just upgrade it without changing everything typically you have on your laptop or computer. So if you have a Mac, you have to upgrade it. It's as good as getting a new one for the price of an old one, or probably paying more. All models are based on the micro power processor, or the PowerPC microprocessor, which stands for Performance Optimization with Enhanced RISC, which is Reduced Instruction Self-Set Computing. They're said to be more faster and more resistant to virus, and for the system to get infected by viruses, but their software is really complicated, and in order to upgrade or just run simple tasks, there's a bunch of operations which are involved compared to a straight approach. We have third generation Macs on campus, which are PowerPC G3. We have a fourth generation Macs on campus as well. These are in a lot of campuses, a lot of classes here right now. Could be in some of the classes in Carl Wimberly Hall, 122, 102 have a Mac in them as well. Some rooms in Cowley Hall is 156, also has a Mac and a PC. The G4, I haven't seen these as such typically in a lab or in a setting, but these are in the CFA, couple of rooms I guess.
In Cali too.
In Cowley Hall as well. So these are all in one, and they have the computer and the screen, everything is as one unit. So if it is about space, this would be a good alternative. The fifth generation Macs are the ones which we have in Murphy Library right now. There are only two of them, and there are some in Wing 2 and the Apple Lab in Wing. These computers seem to be the latest generation in terms of Apple's productivity, but they have a lot of issues relating the computer having issues with overheating, and they have to be constantly reimaged, and have been having some issues with their firmware upgrading, and try to get like copies of software as well. In terms of Macs versus PCs, we definitely prefer PCs, and they're more easy to handle and they're easy to upgrade and work with, whereas Macs are a little harder, and we usually don't prefer that we have under warranty, or just changing the components in terms of laptops or PCs is harder comparatively when we're dealing with PCs. So general information, common PCs use Microsoft Windows platform, and Macs use the Macintosh from Steve Jobs. The benefit of a computer is you can actually custom make your own case. It's easy to just get components. Most of the times they're covered under warranty. They're easier to work with, easier to replace, and establishing and setting up different components of your computer. You can upgrade them constantly. You can change it the way you want it, and it's easier to just like mold it rather than just having something straightforward and just using it the way it is. So PCs are easy to set up, PCs are easy to work with, and they're always comfortable to just get used to. The Macs have greater degree of computer security. They're resistant to a lot of viruses, and they have a good software based platform, and they have a good file storage system as well. A little bit about the operating systems which the computers have, and on campus we typically have the Windows XP, and they're going to be upgraded with Windows Vista or Windows 7 this coming summer. And both the operating systems, which are Mac OS and Windows, are upgradable, and Windows can be changed to any based on the user. You can use an XP or Vista or Windows 7 2000 Millennium Edition, anything. Softwares include Windows Multimedia Player, Real Player, QuickTimes, iTunes. Everything can be upgraded. All of the firmware updates are available online. All you have to do is log in and sign up for that, and you can receive the upgrades. Just a background about PC. This is how we can actually identify a PC background, like Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 7. These are they are multifunctional platforms. They set and use different platforms, which you can actually have a lot of graphical user interface. It's just an interface between the computer and the person. The function which the computer performs is displayed as an output on this monitor. This is just a graphical user interface between us and the computer. And Mac uses Mac OS, which performs a little better, but it's graphically definitely better than the computers and the Windows, as the Mac's graphical user interface is much advanced and uses latest technology compared to the Windows technology. The only reason why we have to deal with this operating system is because when we are changing and when we're working with a lot of faculties and computers on campus, we need to be aware of what operating system we're using, because Windows Vista and Windows 7 are slightly different. As a student, we might be more used to it, but the faculty is not. So it's more important for us to just be aware of what software or what kind of interface the faculty is using, and to help them out at times when we just upgrade their system without their knowledge, or let them know that they cannot be upgraded, and they have to be upgraded as such. That's about just basics of computers. And talking about all this graphical user interfaces, it's really important for us to even understand the output sources which come from a computer. When we're talking about output sources which are coming from a computer, I am referring to the video displays and the video cards and the different connectors which we'll be using and dealing with, because the computers always are hooked to the projector, and we have a lot of troubleshooting with the projectors and the computers. We have different cables like VGA cable which we use, which stands for Video Graphical Array. It is more the analog type signal. It is just a basic signal type, which is the most common one which we have in most of the computers and the laptops. But we've been replacing all the VGA with the DVI, which stands for Digital Visual Interface, which has more graphical advantages compared to the VGA, and there's no signal loss. And most of the projectors, which are the digital projectors now, have the DVI slot. So we are switching from analog to digital right now. The other source which we're using are the HDMI, which stands for High Definition Multimedia Interface, which is useful for accessing a lossless video and audio display as well. It is compatible with any DVI player, any DVI media. There is compatible ends which we have, and compatible cables from DVI to HDMI, HDMI to DVI. So there is no loss in whatsoever media which we are playing with DVI and HDMI. So we're switching from VGA analog to DVI and HDMI digital in almost all the campus classes and labs. That's about computers, and different slots in a computer motherboard are the PCI slots, which are the slots where the memories go, and the video cards, video display cards, extension, USBs, all of them are examples of the PCI slots. That's about how to build a computer and what kinds of technology in terms of campus computers we have, and operating systems and general information. So if you have any questions.